It is September 29th, 2024, and Hezbollah Secretary General Sayed Hassan Nasrallah was killed in an Israeli attack on southern Beirut on Friday. An Israeli attack using 2,000-pound bombs that are outlawed under the Geneva Convention. But you don't hear any condemnation about really any of that coming from the West, or more specifically, coming from the US, which supplied those bombs to Israel. Instead, US politicians and officials alike are praising Israel while completely ignoring the war crimes that they themselves took part in as members of the US government. And now you have reports citing anonymous Israeli officials saying that the reason that they decided to assassinate Nasrallah was because he refused any kind of ceasefire deal between Hezbollah and Israel that did not also include a ceasefire and an end to Israel's genocidal bombardment and blockade of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. So how did we get to this point? Where do tensions stand? And where does the conflict in the region go from here? Let's get into it. Now, first and foremost, I want to speak to the shock of Nasrallah's death. He was the Secretary General of Hezbollah for 32 years, and he took that place after the previous leader was actually killed in an Israeli airstrike along with his wife and son. And it was under Nasrallah's leadership that Hezbollah successfully drove out the invading Israeli forces from southern Lebanon in the year 2000, putting an end to an 18-year occupation. Nasrallah was also instrumental in Hezbollah's victory during the 2006 war against Israel, and he called it a divine victory. One thing I noticed as I was researching for this video, really taking into account what everyone had to say about Nasrallah, including the Western media, I noticed that time and time again in their write-ups on his death and his legacy, they mentioned this criticism of him for the fact that he stood behind Syrian President Bashar al-Assad when the West was trying so hard to overthrow him. Now, as we know, Assad is still in power. That overthrow did not work, but it did lead to the suffering, the death of many Syrians as a result. And Syrians are still suffering today, not because Assad is in power, but because the West has refused to lift their sanctions against this country, because the West instituted an attempted backlash against Assad that was in place for many years, that is now slowly but surely coming back around to where he is being accepted in the region once again. But because Nasrallah stood by him, because he stood by the Syrian people and the man that they wanted to stay in power, because of all of that, you've got Western media calling him an increasingly divisive figure, saying that his critics worried that he went too far beyond Lebanon, that he didn't just focus on his own country, which, if you know anything about the West, you know that is a criticism that is laughable at best. And yes, I did see plenty of, let's just say, pro-Israel talking heads here in the US who claim that Nasrallah was anti-Semitic or that he was somehow a terrorist. But if you actually pay attention to his legacy, to what he had to say, it's very clear here. He was not against the Jewish people. He was against imperialism. And let's be honest here, there is no greater form of imperialism than when the West marches into the Middle East, determines that they are going to create a state for a special certain type of people, and then drive out 700,000 people, or 85% of the people who were living on that land. And yet the West acts surprised, as if they just can't understand why the Middle East didn't immediately embrace their Zionist colonialist project when that project was using weapons branded with "Made in the USA" to kill and terrorize people in the region. And I've had the opportunity over the last year to talk to a number of people who are from Lebanon, who live in the country, and several of them have become regulars here on this show. And the one thing that I find in common is every single one of them expresses a frustration, not with the Jewish people, but with the West and its imperial imperialist mindset with the West for invading their lands and expelling their people, for waging wars on their homes and their community and their land. So no, I don't personally believe that Nasrallah was anti-Semitic, but I do believe that he was anti-imperialist, and we saw evidence of that all throughout his career. Another thing that I noticed that the West can't seem to figure out about Nasrallah was why he chose to engage in conflict with Israel in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks, after Israel began its genocidal bombardment and blockade of the Palestinian people. And one thing that Nasrallah made very clear in the speeches that he gave over the last year was that he knew that the fight for the Palestinian people was the ultimate fight. He also knew that the international community was not going to do anything to help the Palestinians. It wasn't even going to do the bare minimum. As Nasrallah noted in a speech that he gave back in January, Israel was killing Palestinians by the tens of thousands, and the international community was doing absolutely nothing. He pointed out the fact that every time that the United Nations Security Council came up with some kind of resolution demanding a ceasefire, the US would just come in and use its veto power to block it in defense of Israel. And so nothing ended up getting done at the end of the day. And that's what he noted in this clip that was published by Decensored News.
It is the Americans who are preventing the end of the war in Gaza. It is the Americans who are using the veto at the Security Council. And even their official spokespeople are saying that Israelis are not deliberately killing civilians. Well, 22,000 martyrs, mostly women and children. What are they? Collateral damage? But this is what official American spokespeople are telling us. The U.S. have shown us that they do not respect the international community, they do not respect international resolutions, they do not respect human rights and values.
Now, one really important point that I want to make here is the fact that Hezbollah could have easily engaged in a full-scale war with Israel nearly 1 year ago, right? They could have said, after just a few weeks of Israel's genocidal bombardment and blockade of the Palestinian people, that they were stepping in, that there was going to be a full-scale war, and that Israel was going to feel pain for what it was doing to the people in Gaza. They could have done that, but they chose not to. And one of the reasons why Nasrallah has highlighted it time and time again was the fact that they never wanted the focus to be taken away from the Palestinians, right? They knew that if there was a full-scale war involving Hezbollah and Israel, if Israel had its forces invading Lebanon, that the results of that would be that the world would be focusing on Lebanon. They wouldn't be focusing on the Palestinians anymore. And he also knew that the situation for the Palestinians was becoming increasingly dire, right? You have these people who are being starved to death. They're facing a variety of diseases. They have no medical care. And at the same time, Israel is bombing their hospitals, their homes, their UN shelters, their refugee camps. The list goes on and on and on. And these people are being displaced over and over again. And that's why, even as in the last 2 weeks, we saw Israel carrying out terror attacks across Lebanon involving exploding pagers and other devices. Even last week, as we saw Israel carry out days of bombings across Lebanon that killed over 700 people, the overwhelming majority of them civilians. Even as all of that was happening, we did not see Nasrallah back down from his original mission. When there were talks for a possible ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel, he demanded that there had to be a ceasefire for Gaza too. In fact, as anonymous Israeli officials told NBC News, that's why they went forward with the plan to assassinate Nasrallah on Friday, because he would not accept any diplomatic solution to end the fighting on the Israel-Lebanon border that was not tied to an end to the war in Gaza. His goal was literally to stop an ongoing genocide. And I know that there are going to be arguments and debates over Syed Hassan Nasrallah, whether he had the best methods, right? What he could have done differently, whether he could still be alive today if this hadn't happened or that hadn't happened, or Iran had done this or Hezbollah had done that. I know that those debates will be ongoing, but for now, in the direct aftermath of his killing, I do want to note that this man did more for the Palestinian people than anyone else in the region, let alone the entire world. He is a true martyr, and his legacy will be tough to follow. And in a statement confirming Nasrallah's death on Saturday, Hezbollah vowed to continue on confronting the enemy in support of Gaza and Palestine and in defense of Lebanon and its steadfast and honorable people. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about how this attack was carried out because I think that this is particularly important. As we know, Israel had been carrying out days of bombings targeting the southern suburbs of Beirut, targeting areas that were heavily populated by civilians. But if Israel's conduct for the entire 76 years of its existence, along with its ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people over the last year, has taught us anything, it is that Israel does not care about international law. And to be fair, why would they? Every single time they commit yet another war crime, the US just comes in and bails them out anyway. But I digress. So on Friday, Israel bombed Beirut. And this time, they really ramped up their targeted attack. They completely leveled at least 4 apartment buildings, with the New York Times analysis noting that Israel also bombed an additional 4 apartment buildings in the same neighborhood. But their target was under those buildings. And as Al Jazeera reported, citing Israeli media, Israel used around 85 ground penetration munitions to carry out this attack. The bombs weigh between 2,000 and 4,000 pounds each. They're referred to as bunker buster missiles because they burrow deep into the ground before they detonate and can penetrate 30 meters of earth or 6 meters of concrete, creating shockwaves that can collapse other structures. It's also important to note that the Geneva Convention outlaws the use of these bombs in heavily populated civilian areas due to the potential for mass or indiscriminate killings, but as we just noted, Israel doesn't care. In fact, they're proud of it. As reports noted, the IDF released images showing F-15I fighter jets of the Israeli Air Force's 69th Squadron taking off to carry out the assassination of Nasrallah. These jets were equipped with at least 15 2,000-pound munitions with an American-made precision guidance system that attaches to the bombs. Speaking of American-made, it was really no secret how Israel got their hands on these bombs because as the Wall Street Journal reported back in December of last year, the 2,000-pound bombs were among the arsenal that the Biden administration had gone into overdrive to send Israel after October 7th. They also noted that with the new shipments, the U.S. urged Israel to reduce its civilian casualties. And we see how well that worked out. Now, of course, right on cue, the Biden administration has come out and they're claiming that they had no idea that Israel was planning to assassinate Nasrallah. In fact, they claimed that they only found out about the attack, were told about it by Israel as it was already being carried out. But does the U.S. condemn the violation of international law that Israel committed using the weapons that they sent them? No. Instead, you have the White House National Security spokesperson, John Kirby, going to CNN and telling them that the U.S. still stands with Israel, and even saying that he believes that this attack was good for the world. Now, I would love to talk to John Kirby in a few weeks, maybe a few months, as to how he feels about that statement and all of the unrest that it has unleashed and will unleash in the region. But nevertheless, if you ever wonder about how the U.S. looks at Israel, about what message they're sending to Israel, right? If you ever wonder, are they behind closed doors, they being the Biden administration, calling Netanyahu and telling him that he's really got to stop it and they mean it this time? If you ever think that that's the case, well, look at the real message that the U.S. is sending to Israel, because just this week, the Biden administration announced another $8.7 billion in military aid for Israel. Yet another reminder that you can always count on the US to keep up with that good old international rules-based order as long as they make the rules and they give the orders. So, where does this all go from here? That is the big question right now. Well, Israel didn't stop the killing with Friday's attack. Instead, they continue to carry out massacre after massacre of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. They've also continued with their bombing in Lebanon, killing dozens of people today alone, according to the latest reports. And despite Hezbollah twice expelling Israeli occupation forces from Lebanon in the past, you now have reports that Israel is considering yet another ground invasion as they stand emboldened by the assassination of Nasrallah and the continued support that they are receiving from the US. Because not a single member of the Biden administration is doing anything close to condemning Israel right now. Both Biden and Harris rushed out their statements on Saturday, or their teams rushed out their statements, let's be real here, insisting that they stand with Israel, right? They support their close ally. Biden also said that he had directed Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to increase the United States military assets in the region. And I have officially lost count of the sheer number of times that the Biden administration has told Israel, we want to see de-escalation, we want to see a decrease in the killing of civilians, and then literally turned around and sent them even more weapons and support. But this also means further escalation when it comes to the targeting of Israel, with Hezbollah increasing its barrages of missiles into northern Israel so far, and Ansarallah in Yemen also targeting Israel's Ben Gurion airport near Tel Aviv with a ballistic missile as Netanyahu landed upon his return from the UN General Assembly in New York. Now, Israel was quick to come out and insist that they shot that missile down, but it does still show a picture of Yemen's capabilities, and it did hit awfully close to home. Then there's the question of Iran. The country also showcased a portion of its capabilities earlier this year when it retaliated for the Israeli attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria. But Iran has been very strategic, and I know that for many, they see Iran as not doing nearly enough, right? Because the country also has not yet retaliated for the Israeli assassination of Palestinian diplomat and Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh while he was in Tehran. In response to the assassination of Nasrallah, Iran's supreme leader released a statement on X on Saturday in which he called for all Muslims to stand with the people of Lebanon and the honorable Hezbollah, offering their resources and assistance as Hezbollah confronts the usurping, cruel, malicious Zionist regime. He went on to vow that the blows struck by the resistance front on the worn-out, deteriorating body of the Zionist regime will become even more crushing. That's as Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian vowed that Tehran will deliver a decisive response to Israel for its crimes. Now, notably, the recent elected Iranian president has been very clear about the fact that he wants there to be improved relations with the West, right? He wants the West to lift their sanctions on Iran, the sanctions that have harmed so many people across the country. And because of that, I have seen a lot of criticism of him, right? Saying that he's not doing enough, that Iran needs to go all in. The thing that we don't know yet is if this assassination, this latest one carried out by Israel, if that will change things, right? If that will cause Iran to change course, if it will cause it to deliver heavier blows against Israel, to push this to even more of a regional conflict, as Israel is clearly doing the same on their end, doing really everything they can, from terror attacks to targeted assassinations to, in this case, war crimes. The list has been on and just endless at this point. But the reality is that none of us know where this is going. I know there are some people online right now saying that Hezbollah is going to be back and stronger than ever. Just wait. You have other people still who said that because they took out Nasrallah, that the group is never going to be the same. And the truth is, we don't know. Is it option A? Is it option B? Is it an option C that we're not even considering at this point? But if there's anything that we should have learned from Hezbollah's history, it's that the group always comes back, because we have to remember Nasrallah became the Secretary General because he was replacing the previous leader who was killed in an Israeli airstrike. And yet the group was better than ever under Nasrallah. And if you look back at that time 32 years ago, I mean, if we compare 1992 to 2024, where Hezbollah stands, they are so much more powerful today. They have better weapons capabilities. They're also much larger than they were before. And no, it won't happen overnight. We know that it will take time. But if there's anything we've learned from the last year, it's that you cannot kill a resistance. Resistance movements will always exist. Those like Hezbollah and Hamas, especially in the region. And if there's anything we've learned from watching Israel carry out war crime after war crime, targeting the defenseless Palestinian people in ways that we can't even comprehend here in this Western world, where we have so much privilege to not even be able to imagine the kind of world that the Palestinians are being forced to live in right now. In a world like that, where Israel is continuing to escalate tensions, the result of that is that not only will there always be a resistance, but there will always be increasing support for a resistance, because they see Israel as the enemy. They see the crimes it is carrying out, and they see that it must be stopped. So it remains to be seen what Hezbollah will do next, what Iran will do next, and even really what Israel will do next. But what we do know is what the U.S. will do next. We do know that the U.S. will continue to support its ally in carrying out a full-on genocide and escalating tensions and pushing for a full-scale regional war. We know that the U.S. will continue sending 2,000-pound bombs, even as it knows that they will be used on heavily populated civilian areas, whether that be in Gaza or, in this case, in Lebanon. We also know that the U.S. has the power to stop all of this right now. With one single phone call, the U.S. could have prevented the assassination of Sayed Hassan Nasrallah. The U.S. didn't have to send those 2,000-pound bombs. It didn't have to support Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people. It didn't have to, on and on and on. But as long as the U.S. continues to use its power in the region to refuse to exert any power whatsoever over Israel, over Netanyahu, then the U.S. is complicit in every single crime. And that's something everyone should be talking about. If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you find value in my work, please take a moment to consider signing up as a monthly paid subscriber. You can sign up on my Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll get access to all of the latest when it comes to my work, as well as my new series specifically for paid subscribers called Sanction. You can also catch that series over on my Patreon page. That's patreon.com/RachelBlevins. That's where you can join the community there. And you can also contribute to my work by chiming in on the weekly polls that I post about what different topics I may cover, or you can send me different guests that you think that I should interview and more. And as always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.